My daughter's small body trembled in my arms, lake water still dripping from her hair. Can you imagine that? Two strangers had just tried to drown her, right in front of me, because get this, she didn't belong on their side of the dock. The audacity, right? What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly have known, was that my brother Cole was already walking down the hill. And Cole? He keeps his promises the way most people keep grudges, forever. That deep, that unyielding. I'm Marcus. I'm not a cop, not a soldier, just a single dad who works construction 6 days a week and spends Sundays teaching my kid how to bait a hook. My life is pretty simple, pretty predictable. That morning started like any other. Coffee brewing, Lila glued to her cartoons, a cooler packed with juice boxes, and of course, the last clean t-shirt in her drawer. Just a regular Sunday, right? By sunset, though, I'd seen what real evil looks like, and I'd watched my baby brother turn that evil into a bedtime story. Nobody, least of all those three bullies, would ever want to hear again. It was a day that ripped a hole in my world, then patched it back up with something harder, something forged in fire. When my wife died, Lila was 4. It felt like the world just stopped. Everything we'd built, every plan, every dream, shattered into a million pieces. The city, our house, it all felt suffocating, filled with ghosts of what used to be. I needed a change, a fresh start, a place where Lila and I could breathe again, away from the constant reminders. So I sold our house in the city, packed up our lives, and bought a fixer-upper cabin 2 hours north. It was nestled by a quiet lake, surrounded by towering pines and the kind of stillness that promised healing. I promised my daughter we'd build new memories there, paint new dreams on that serene canvas. A fresh start. Oh, that's what I told her, what I told myself. We'd make this our haven. The locals, though, they had other ideas. Or at least some of them did. Most folks were genuinely good, the kind who'd offer a wave, ask about the weather, share a fishing tip. They were the salt-of-the-earth types, welcoming enough. But there was always a group, 3 brothers, last name Hoyt, who treated the public dock like it had their family crest nailed to it, like they owned the very air above the water. The big one, a mountain of a man with a perpetual sneer, was Kurt. Then there was Wade, the middle brother, all bluster and cheap aggression. And Ryder, the youngest, a wiry kid with eyes that always seemed to be calculating. They ran a failing tackle shop, barely scraping by, and everyone knew they sold a little something extra on the side to make ends meet. They loved to brag about their bloodlines, claiming their ancestors were the first fur trappers in these parts, as if that gave them some ancient right to everything. Translation? They thought the lake was theirs, an inherited kingdom, and the rest of us were just renting oxygen. Visitors, outsiders, temporary inconveniences in their personal fiefdom. They made sure you knew it too, with subtle glares, territorial posturing, and an air of simmering resentment toward anyone not from around here. My brother Cole lived 2 counties over, far enough to be out of the immediate loop, but close enough to matter. He's younger by 13 months, but he's always been the bigger storm, the quiet force of nature, 6'4", 220, and a quiet that makes you check your pulse, makes you wonder what he's thinking, what he's planning. It's not an empty quiet, it's a loaded silence. He spent 8 years as an Army Ranger, seeing things and doing things most of us can only imagine. He came home with a Purple Heart, a loyal German Malinois named Daisy, and 0 patience for bullies. He'd learned to size up a threat, to deal with it efficiently without fanfare. I only called him when things got heavy, when I was truly out of options. And that Sunday, things didn't just get heavy. They went nuclear. We arrived at dawn, the air still crisp with the promise of a new day. Lila, my little firecracker, was practically vibrating with excitement. She wanted to try the new pink fishing rod Aunt Karen had mailed her, a bright splash of color against the muted morning. I remember the crunch of the gravel under our feet as we walked the familiar path to the dock. Mist hovered over the water like smoke, ghostly tendrils dancing above the glassy surface. It was beautiful, peaceful. Lila sprinted ahead, her pigtails bouncing like springs, her laughter echoing softly in the stillness. I remember thinking, this is it. This is peace. This is what we came here for. That fleeting thought, that moment of pure contentment, was shattered in an instant. Kurt stepped out from behind the boat hoist, a hulking shadow against the rising sun, blocking Lila's path. He was already there, waiting, a dark presence. He said, his voice a low growl. "Public docks closed, kid." My blood ran cold. Closed? I stepped forward, putting myself between him and Lila. "Since when?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even, trying to project a calm I didn't feel. He looked me up and down, a slow, contemptuous sweep that felt like a challenge. Then he spat in the water, a deliberate, disgusting act of disrespect. "Since I said." I took Lila's hand, her small fingers already trembling in mine. I squeezed, a silent promise of protection. We stepped around him, trying to ignore the simmering aggression. Wade and Ryder were already on the dock, beers in hand, their laughter grating like kids pulling wings off flies. Cruel, careless. I ignored them too, or tried to. I led Lila to the far end of the dock, as far from them as possible. I set up our gear, baited Lila's hook with a wriggling worm, trying to make everything feel normal, safe. She cast, a little clumsy but full of enthusiasm, and squealed with delight when the bobber splashed into the water, sending ripples across the surface. For 20 blissful minutes, we existed in our own little bubble. We were fishing, just a dad and his daughter, making those new memories I'd promised. Then the Hoyts started drinking louder, their voices growing bolder, coarser. They dropped hard R slurs about tourists, about outsiders, their words sharp and ugly, cutting through the morning calm. And then they started aiming their casts, not at fish, but straight at my daughter's line, deliberately trying to tangle her up, to ruin her fun. It was a game to them, a way to exert their petty dominance. When Wade reeled in his line, he did it with a vicious yank, pulling Lila's rod so hard it flew from her grip, skittered across the planks with a sickening clatter, and then, with a final heartbreaking splash, plopped into the lake. Lila froze, her small face crumpling, her eyes wide with shock and unshed tears. The joy of the morning evaporated. I stood, my jaw tight, a cold fury starting to build in my gut. "Lila," I said, my voice strained. "Sit on the cooler. Stay there." I walked over to Wade, trying one last time to be reasonable, to avoid a confrontation. "I need that rod back," I said, my voice low, controlled. Kurt belched, a loud, disgusting sound, then sneered, "Fetch, city boy." I repeated the request, slower this time, each word carefully enunciated, a warning in my tone. "I need the rod back." Wade, emboldened by his brothers and the alcohol, shoved me. It was a casual, dismissive shove, but it was enough. I shoved back harder, a surge of adrenaline coursing through me. Next thing I knew, Ryder, the youngest, moved with surprising speed. He grabbed Lila by her life vest, not gently, but with a rough, proprietary grip. He lifted her off the dock, her small body dangling precariously over the dark water. She screamed, a raw, terrified sound that tore through me. She kicked desperately, instinctively. I lunged, a primal roar escaping my throat. But Kurt, the big one, tackled me from behind, driving my face first into the rough, splintering boards of the dock. The taste of wood, the smell of lake water, the sharp pain in my nose. It all hit me at once. But worse, far worse, was the sound. I heard my daughter choke on lake water as they dunked her. Once, twice. Her small body convulsed. A red haze descended. I roared, a sound I barely recognized as my own. I got an elbow free, a desperate, frantic movement, and cracked Kurt's nose with everything I had. Blood sprayed, a crimson mist against the morning light. Wade dropped his beer, the glass shattering on the dock, and rushed in, a wild look in his eyes. I took 2 punches, one to the gut, one to the jaw. The world swimming for a second. I rolled, trying to get my bearings, and saw Ryder push Lila's head under again. That's when it happened. That's when Daisy started barking from the hill, a deep, resonant bark that cut through the chaos. And then my brother's voice, clear and cold, cut through the air like winter wind. "Let the girl go. Now." Cole walked down the gravel path, a figure of quiet menace. He was in fatigues, the kind he used to wear in the Rangers, Daisy on heel, her leash looped casually in his belt. Sunglasses on, no smile. His presence was a palpable shift in the air, a sudden drop in temperature. Ryder hesitated, his grip slackening, and then slowly he lifted Lila, coughing and dripping, her small body shuddering. Cole's voice, still calm, still lethal, cut through the silence. "Set her on the dock. Step back. Ryder, to his credit, obeyed. He gently, almost reverently, placed Lila back on the planks, then took a step back, his eyes darting nervously between Cole and me. Kurt scrambled up, holding his nose, blood streaming between his fingers, cursing under his breath. Wade, always the loudmouth, squared up, trying to regain some semblance of control. "This ain't your fight, soldier boy," he sneered, puffing out his chest. Cole didn't dignify that with a full response. He answered by stepping closer, slowly, deliberately. Close enough Wade could smell his morning breath, close enough to invade his personal space, to make him feel small. "It became my fight the second you touched my niece." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken promise. I scooped Lila into my arms, pressing her small, wet face to my chest. She was shaking, her sobs racking her tiny frame. "Daddy," she choked out, her voice barely a whisper. I dropped my rod. My heart broke all over again. In that moment of terror, her biggest concern was a lost fishing rod. "I know, baby," I whispered back, my own voice thick with emotion. "I promise you 100 new ones." Cole, his eyes never leaving the Hoyts, told me to take her to the truck. "Call 911 if you want," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I'm giving them 1 minute to apologize." Kurt, still clutching his bleeding nose, managed a bloody laugh. It was a defiant, arrogant sound, laced with pain. That laugh, that dismissive, arrogant sound, cost him 3 teeth and 6 stitches. I didn't see the first punch. The speed of it was too fast. I only heard the sickening crack, and then the splash as Kurt hit the water, a dead weight. Then Cole turned to Wade and Ryder, his face utterly devoid of emotion. "Your turn," he said, his voice flat. They ran. They didn't even think twice. They just turned tail and bolted, scrambling over each other in their haste, pure fear etched on their faces. Cole let them reach the parking lot, let them think they might actually escape, before he whistled. It was a short, sharp sound. Daisy, who had been standing patiently by Cole's side, a silent, furry sentinel, took off like a shot. She's 100-pound Malinois, a blur of muscle and speed. She outran them easily, her powerful strides devouring the distance, before they even hit the tree line. The chase was short, brutal, and silent, ending with whimpers and shouts from the woods. The deputy rolled up about 10 minutes later, his cruiser kicking up a cloud of dust on the gravel road. Cole was calmly wringing lake water from his shirt, his movements precise and unhurried. Kurt sat on the dock, wrapped in a blanket the deputy had provided, spitting pink into the lake, refusing to talk, his face a swollen, bloody mess. Wade and Ryder limped back from the woods, looking thoroughly chastised and more than a little bruised, Daisy trotting behind them like a bored shepherd, her tail wagging ever so slightly. The deputy, a local named Miller, asked questions, his voice tired, his eyes scanning the scene. The Hoyts stayed mute, glaring. I gave my statement, trying to articulate the horror of what had happened, the terror of seeing my daughter dunked. Cole, ever the enigma, gave a half smile and handed the deputy a business card from the VA that listed his rank as retired. Miller took notes, his pen scratching against the paper, then radioed for an ambulance for Kurt. No arrests were made that day, not officially. Small-town politics, you know. 3 local boys, known troublemakers but locals, against 1 outsider with a military file thicker than the phone book. Deputy Miller just sighed, rubbed his temples, and said, "Let the court sort it." I knew what that meant. It meant nothing. It meant they'd get a slap on the wrist, if that. It meant they'd be back. Cole loaded Daisy into his Jeep, the big dog leaping in with practiced ease. He told me to follow him home, his voice quiet but firm. I buckled Lila into her car seat, watching her finally fall asleep, exhausted by the trauma, before we even hit the main road. The rearview mirror showed smoke still curling off the lake, a lingering scar on the landscape, like the morning itself had been bruised. I felt relief, a profound, bone-deep relief that Lila was safe, that Cole had been there. But also a new pressure started building behind my eyes, a cold dread in my stomach. They'd try again. Men that proud, that territorial, always do. They wouldn't let this go. I just didn't expect how quick. 2 nights later, the fragile peace of my cabin was shattered. I woke to the distinct, terrifying sound of glass breaking. Not just a crack, but a violent, explosive shatter. My heart leapt into my throat. The living room window was gone, a jagged hole staring back at me. A beer bottle, still intact, was spinning on the rug, slowly, menacingly. And then the smell. Gasoline. It permeated the air, thick and cloying, already soaking into the carpet, creeping towards the curtains. My blood ran cold. They were trying to burn us out. I grabbed the fire extinguisher, my hands shaking, and doused the flames before they could even kiss the curtains, before they could truly take hold. Lila, thankfully, slept through it all, thanks to the noise-canceling headphones she'd been wearing ever since the lake incident. A small mercy. I stood outside, the night air suddenly feeling hostile, and called Cole. He arrived in 12 minutes flat, his headlights cutting through the darkness, carrying a black duffel bag that looked far too heavy. Inside, trail cams, motion lights, a pump-action shotgun, and 2 boxes of shells. He didn't need to say much. His eyes, grim and determined, spoke volumes. He just looked at me, then at the shattered window, and said, his voice a low growl, "We can play defense, or we can end it." There was no hesitation. I chose door number 2. We were ending this one way or another. We spent the next week wiring the property, turning my quiet cabin into a fortress. Cole was methodical, precise, like he was back in a combat zone, but with a different kind of enemy. His rules were strict. No lethal traps, Marcus. We want evidence, not corpses. He wanted to bury them legally, not physically. Cameras hidden in birdhouses, blending seamlessly with the feeders. Motion sensors along the driveway. Trip lines that pinged our phones with a silent alert. It was exhausting, nerve-wracking work. Every rustle of leaves, every shadow, setting me on edge. I kept Lila inside after school, inventing excuses, letting her paint Daisy's nails with glitter polish while I cooked dinner with one eye glued to the security app on my phone. Every little notification, every flicker on the screen, sent a jolt through me. Wednesday night, 2:13 a.m. The app buzzed, a soft, insistent vibration against my palm. My eyes shot open. 2 figures, barely visible against the dark tree line, creeping slowly, cautiously. Wade and Ryder. Kurt was still on crutches, probably nursing cracked ribs from his impromptu swim in the lake. Cole and I stepped onto the porch, weapons low, Daisy silent at heel, a shadow among shadows. Our floodlights, rigged to the motion sensors, burst to life, bathing the entire yard in blinding white. The brothers froze, caught in the harsh glare, like deer mesmerized by headlights. Cole's voice, calm and clear, cut through the sudden silence. "Smile, boys. You're streaming live to the cloud." Their faces, pale with shock and fear, twisted into pure panic. They ran again, tripping over themselves in their haste, disappearing back into the comforting darkness of the woods. This time, we had footage. Clear, undeniable footage. The next morning, Cole drove to the sheriff's office with the thumb drive in hand, a quiet confidence in his stride. I expected warrants. I expected arrests. What we got was a phone call a few hours later. Sheriff Miller, his voice sounding genuinely apologetic, claimed he'd lost the files. "Hard drive crashed," he mumbled. The clerk, a sweet woman named Carol, had accidentally formatted the drive. Unbelievable. The old boys' club, thicker than lake ice in January, had circled the wagons. They weren't going to help us. Cole came back whistling, a faint, almost imperceptible tune. He just smiled, a glint in his eye, and said, "Plan B." Plan B was classic Cole. Use their own game, tilt the board so hard it broke. He spent the entire afternoon staked out at the tackle shop parking lot, patient as a predator, waiting for Kurt to limp out for lunch. When Kurt finally appeared, hobbling on his crutches, a scowl etched on his swollen face, Cole greeted him with a wide, almost jovial smile. He handed Kurt a brightly colored flyer. "Upcoming fishing derby. Grand prize, $5 grand, it blared. Sponsored by Veterans for Lake Preservation. A fake veterans charity Cole had invented on the spot, complete with a hastily designed logo. Kurt, bless his greedy heart, loved money more than he hated us. He saw dollar signs, not a trap. He signed his crew up on the spot, his grin revealing the gaps where his teeth used to be. The derby was set for the following Saturday. Same dock, but this time, a much bigger crowd, plenty of eyes. Cole leaned in, his voice a low, conspiratorial whisper. "Bring your best rods, Kurt. Winner takes all." Kurt grinned through his broken teeth, a flicker of triumph in his eyes, never once asking why Cole, the man who'd put him in the hospital, was suddenly organizing a fishing derby. Pride, I realized then, blinds louder than any floodlights. It makes you deaf to warning bells. Saturday arrived hot and heavy, the sun bouncing off the water like shattered glass, making the lake shimmer with a deceptive beauty. Half the county showed up, families with picnic baskets, excited teens, even the local news guy with his clunky camcorder, looking for a feel-good story. The Derby entry fee, $50 a team, cash only. Cole, looking every inch the genial host, collected the money, his movements smooth and efficient, stuffing the envelopes into a metal lockbox labeled Disabled Vets. The Hoyts arrived in their dad's battered Ranger, a cooler of beer rattling in the back, brand new rods glinting in the sun, rods they clearly couldn't afford. They swaggered, full of their usual bluster, betting side money, loud enough for everyone to hear, that they'd sweep the pot, clean out the competition. They were practically radiating arrogance. What they didn't know, couldn't have known, was that Cole had rigged the scale and the measuring board the night before. Not cheating, not exactly. More like ensuring every fish they weighed triggered a hidden sensor, a tiny, almost invisible device. These sensors fed real-time data to a laptop tucked away in Daisy's kennel crate, a makeshift command center. Every illegal over-limit fish they tried to sneak in, every undersized catch, every bit of foul play got logged with a precise timestamp and a crystal-clear photo. More importantly, Cole had leaked a carefully crafted tip to the state game warden, an anonymous call about someone planning to cheat a veterans charity at a local fishing derby. The warden, a no-nonsense woman named Brenda, brought backup, plainclothes officers blending seamlessly with the curious crowd. The air was thick with anticipation, and you could almost smell blood in the water. The trap was set, and the bait was irresistible. The contest started promptly at 8. By 10, the Hoyts had a bucket full of black bass, a few of them noticeably over the size limit. I watched, my heart pounding, as Wade, thinking he was sly, slipped an undersized fish back into the lake when he thought nobody was looking. Click. The sensor caught it. Ryder, ever the conniver, was even more brazen. I saw him clearly, stuffing lead weights down gill plates to bulk up their scores, adding illegal heft to their catches. Click. Flash. The camera caught it all. And Kurt, true to form, his hand quicker than the eye, pocketed entry cash when Cole turned his back, a sly triumphant smirk on his face. All on tape. Every single dishonest act, meticulously recorded. At noon, Cole gave the signal. A short, sharp squeak from Daisy's favorite toy. Warden Brenda, cool and professional, stepped up to the weigh station, a calm authority radiating from her. "All right, gentlemen," she announced, her voice cutting through the chatter. "Time for a quick inspection of the buckets." Kurt smirked, confident in his deception, his eyes gleaming with anticipated victory. Then Warden Brenda reached into his bucket. Her fingers closed around something hard, something metallic. She pulled out a lead weight, then another, and another, still attached to a string, then a short fish, clearly undersized. And then the coup de grace. A wad of cash, rubber banded with several entry tickets, pulled from Kurt's pocket. Chaos erupted. The crowd gasped. Then a low murmur spread through the onlookers, quickly turning into boos. Handcuffs clicked like rain on a tin roof, sharp and final. The news guy, smelling a real story, filmed everything, his camcorder whirring. The Hoyts went white, their bravado evaporating, replaced by pure, unadulterated shock and fear. Cole, seizing the moment, stepped onto a picnic bench, his voice clear and resonant, carrying across the stunned crowd. "These men tried to drown my niece," he declared, his voice ringing with righteous anger. "Today they tried to rob veterans. This lake belongs to all of us, not just them. Let's teach them what honor looks like." A wave of applause, loud and heartfelt, swept through the crowd. Sheriff Miller, who had just arrived, now had no choice. The arrests were public, the evidence solid, irrefutable. Charges were read: fraud, theft, a possession of undersized game, and, thanks to my testimony and the warden's quick thinking, assault on a minor. Lila's incident, now backed by the undeniable weight of a public spectacle. The district attorney later added attempted child endangerment. Bail was set higher than the Hoyts' pride, effectively keeping them locked up. Justice, swift and undeniable, had finally arrived. That night, Cole disappeared. Just vanished. No goodbyes, no explanations. I knew where he was going, though. Rumor had it he visited Kurt in county jail. The official log showed no visitation, of course. But next morning, Kurt, The big to tough bully requested protective custody, claiming someone had slipped him a photo. 3 freshly dug graves, a shovel leaning against a mound of dirt, all silhouetted against a blood-red sunset. No words written, just the image. He got the message, loud and clear. He understood the unspoken threat, the chilling promise of what could happen if he didn't comply. Warden Brenda later told me Cole had spent the evening at the diner across from the jail, nursing a cup of coffee, staring at the building like it owed him money, his presence a silent, chilling vigil. Sometimes, fear isn't a scream. Sometimes it's a whisper, a cold breath on the back of your neck. Wade and Ryder, the lesser of the evils, made bail first, their parents scraping together what little they had. They came home to find their tackle shop windows painted. Not just vandalized, but painted with a terrifying precision. Bright red handprints, smeared as if fresh, and words scrawled in bold, unmistakable letters. Real fear lives here. The graffiti was waterproof, scrub-proof. They tried to paint over it, but the red bled through the fresh coat like it was alive, a persistent, haunting stain. Locals who once tolerated them now crossed the street rather than walk near the shop. Their business, already failing, folded within a month. The bank repossessed their boats, their fishing rods, even the garish neon sign. The Hoyt family name, once a symbol of their territorial claim, peeled off the door like old varnish, fading into oblivion. Court date loomed, a final somber formality. Cole, ever practical, had hired Lila and me a therapist, paying for it with the Derby cash, the money that should have gone to the Hoyts. The therapist, a kind woman with gentle eyes, taught Lila breathing tricks, gave her a tiny bell to ring when the nightmares came, a small silver chime against the darkness. The bell rang less and less each week, a hopeful sign. I asked Cole if he felt guilty, if the weight of what he'd done, what he'd orchestrated, bothered him. He just looked at me, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, and said, "Guilt is for people who hesitate, Marcus." I didn't hesitate. He spent his evenings rebuilding my porch, whistling old cadences, Daisy chasing moths in the twilight, a picture of quiet domesticity that belied the storm he carried within him. I started sleeping through the night again, truly sleeping, for the first time in what felt like forever. 3 days before the trial, Kurt took a plea deal. 5 years in the state pen, a lifetime ban from owning firearms. The judge, clearly influenced by the public outcry and the solid evidence, added a letter he must mail to us, a court-mandated apology. The letter arrived a few weeks later, typed impersonal, no signature. Lila never saw it. I folded it carefully into a paper boat, a small symbolic vessel, and set it on the lake, right where her rod had fallen. I watched the wind carry it outward, further and further, until it sank, dissolving into the cool, dark water. Some pages, I thought, deserve water. They deserve to be washed away, forgotten by the lake itself. Spring came early that year, a vibrant burst of green and warmth. The trees budded like nothing had ever happened, as if the darkness of winter and the darkness of those events had never touched them. Lila, with a newfound resilience, wanted to fish again. We walked the dock at sunrise, a brand new pink rod, even brighter than the last, clutched firmly in her small hand. The dock felt different now, smaller, safer, somehow purified. Cole followed at a distance, a silent guardian, Daisy trotting faithfully at his heel. Lila cast, her movements more confident this time, and caught a sunfish, its scales flashing in the morning light. She laughed, a sound like breaking glass, sharp, bright, impossible to ignore, a sound that pierced through the lingering shadows. I stored that sound next to my heartbeat, a precious melody. Cole left the next week. A new job training dogs for vets in Colorado, a fresh start for him, too. He texts photos now and then. Daisy in the snow, her fur dusted white, mountains taller than grief towering in the background. I reply with shots of Lila, beaming, holding up her latest trout. We don't mention the Hoyts. Some stains, I've learned, fade faster when you stop staring at them, when you let the light of new days wash over them. Sheriff Miller lost re-election that fall. The new guy campaigned hard on cleaning up late corruption, on bringing integrity back to the office. His first act, install cameras on all public docks, a silent promise of transparency. His second act, invite Cole back for a veterans ceremony, a public acknowledgement of his quiet heroism. Cole declined, of course, ever the one to avoid the spotlight. He sent a check instead, a generous donation to the local Veterans Fund. He said, "Heroes are busy being dads, Sheriff." I framed that check, hung it proudly in the cabin, a constant reminder that justice sometimes wears dog tags and whistles, and that quiet strength can move mountains. They tried to drown my daughter, those bullies, thinking the lake would swallow the evidence, swallow her screams, swallow our peace. Instead, the lake gave back every ripple, every echo, every single truth. My brother taught them something far more profound than brute force. He taught them that fear isn't loud. It isn't always a scream. Sometimes it's patient, precise, and fiercely loyal to family. If you're watching this, wondering what I'd do different, knowing what I know now, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Because the moment you threaten a child, the moment you put a hand on an innocent, you forfeit the right to predict the storm that answers. You invite a reckoning. So like, comment, subscribe, tell me below. What would you have done if you were in my boots? I'll read every answer once Lila's asleep, her little bell quiet, the lake calm, and the world just a little more fair.